use Telegram.
Telegram also has end-to-end encryption, and so it would be the most secure way to communicate.
Okay.
Text they can see in real time.
Yeah.
TikTok they can get, but Telegram would be nearly impossible for you to get hold of. FBI is a different story.
Yeah.
Sure. It's not bad. It's taking like 6 minutes to download a half an hour.
And
There they come sliding by. That's them walking away finally at 10:44. That was the group that was sliding away.
they were just harassing.
That was dirty, right?
Yeah, that was dirty.
That was dirty.
They were just harassing.
Sneaky dirty too.
What are you streaming on? None of your
Big-ass smile on their
business.
face.
Asking if you're streaming on Twitch.
Yeah, Twitch was an interesting specific reference. Now, if I can find this download, that would be golden. Now, Live can do automatic cuts of your highlights, so like your most awarded GIFs, things like that, which is pretty cool. I do not see where it downloaded to in my folders yet. Huh. I don't see it. Weird.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, for the noon tour, if you'd like to gather here in the North Wing, please. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Capitol building today. My name is Derek, and I'll be showing you around. We'll take a look at some of the history, the art, the architecture of the Capitol building, and end up with a visit to the observation deck up in the dome. I'd like to begin by starting with the two major reasons that the Capitol building exists at all, why it was built in the late 1800s, about a century and a half ago, roughly. The first is a practical reason. Before the Capitol building existed, Colorado's government was spread all over downtown Denver in rented buildings. The governor's office is in one structure, and the state treasurer's down the street, and the Supreme Court's around the corner. It was inefficient. It was expensive. We were spending about $30,000 a year on rent for all of these facilities. So building one structure that could put all of Colorado government under the same roof would solve a lot of problems. The other reason we built the Capitol, and really the style in which we built the Capitol, reflects what was going on economically at the time. Colorado in the 1880s, 1890s was filthy, stinking rich. The mining industry, and silver mining in particular. Gold was in there, but silver was our big moneymaker at the time. So much wealth coming down from the mountains. You wanted a Capitol that kind of showed off. So the exuberance, the ostentatiousness of the Capitol very much reflects what was going on economically in the state at the time. And we'll get started over in the West Wing, so if you'll follow me right this way. Yes, people just really should go through the line. That's what I don't actually have anything to say here. I just wanted to smell. Alrighty. Now, the state capitol is built almost entirely out of material from the state of Colorado. We wanted to show off the natural resources of the state, and also, well, you wanted to keep as much money from building the capitol inside the state of Colorado as you could. So the vast majority of materials in the Capitol building did come from the state of Colorado. The gray stone on the outside of the building is granite from the town of Gunnison, Colorado, about 4 hours up into the mountains. Most, not all, but most of the white marble floors in the building did come from the town of Marble, Colorado. It's up near Aspen. The same stone from the same quarry was used for the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. Hundreds of buildings around the country and even around the world that are built out of the same white stone. The most famous stone in the building, though, is the red stone that we used for wainscot throughout the Capitol. This is called rose onyx, or Beulah marble, because it comes from the town of Beulah, Colorado, near Pueblo, to the south of Denver. The famous thing about rose onyx is that the Colorado State Capitol is the only place in the world you're ever going to find it. There were a couple of little outcroppings discovered near Beulah, and every last piece was dug up to use here in the building. If you visit the quarry site today, there's a couple of holes in the ground with some rose onyx crumbs at the bottom. And other than that, the entire world's supply here in the Capitol building. And to decorate the Capitol, we did have to go outside the state for a couple of things. Most of the decorative brass, the bottoms of the pillars, the railings through the Capitol, came from foundries in Ohio, Kentucky, and Wisconsin. And the woodwork in the building is white oak from the Ozark Mountains of Missouri and Arkansas. There's not a lot of hardwood sources in the state of Colorado, softwoods, pines, and things like that. So to make sure you're using wood that's not going to get all dinged and scratched and smashed up, we did have to go outside of the state for that. But other than that, pretty much everything here in the Capitol, as far as the construction materials, did come from the state of Colorado. And here in the West Wing, we have some of our former governor's portrait collection on the walls, and a lot more portraits than we used to have. Up until about 15 years ago, we only had the most recent governor's portraits. Nobody had any idea where the older portraits were. And about 15 years ago, we were doing a restoration project in our state archives building to the south of the Capitol, taking down some walls, rearranging spaces, and so on. As we took down the walls, behind the walls, we find these giant burlap-wrapped parcels that the old governor's portraits. It's very creepy. It's like an Edgar Allan Poe story. We're going to seal the governors behind the walls and not tell anybody about it. So the portraits have been restored and rehung in the order in which the governors served. We do not have a complete collection. We have about 2/3 of the governor's portraits here in the Capitol. A few are at the State Historical Society, and others are just missing. We've checked behind other walls and everything too, so where the rest are, I don't know. But the portraits on display start with the oldest one up here in the top center of one of our territorial governors, Alexander Cummings, and they wander through the hallways here on the first floor over to our most recent former governor over here. That's John Hickenlooper, who left office in 2019. He's now a United States Senator in Washington. Any questions while we're here in the West Wing? Distracted by delicious smells. I am too. This is going to be rough. All right.
Besides the Senate hearings, is there anything special going on that's really crowded today?
Beyond the, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Besides the Senate bill hearings, is there anything special going on?
Well, the legislative session is really what's going to bring the biggest crowd. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get upstairs. But we have pretty much every day there's rallies and events. I think there's 2 or 3 different groups that are going to be at different times out on the West Front. It's kind of like the stage for whatever issue of concern of the moment. So that's kind of where all of those happen. One of the really nice things, I've been doing tours here at the Capitol for 28 years. And one of the reasons I've stayed for so long is you never know. Every day is going to be different. There's always something new, so it's exciting. Any other questions? Well, okay, well, let's wander away from the good smells over into the south wing.
That wasn't coming from my
Now, the Colorado State Capitol was designed by an architect named Elijah Myers, who designed 3 state capitol buildings and several hundred public buildings around the United States in the late 1800s. City halls, courthouses, post offices, high schools, hospitals, you name it. He designed 3 state capitol buildings, the first in Lansing, Michigan, and then the second in Austin, Texas. Once he'd figured out how to do it right, he came here to Denver, and his office actually produced the watercolor that's on the wall just above you over there. The Capitol building looks pretty much like the original design. A few things were simplified to save money as construction went on. The roof line's a little bit less fancy. We never did get around to putting a statue on top of the building. There had been some debate as to how you were going to choose a model for this allegorical figure representing the state of Colorado. But really the main reason, 2 main reasons. Number one, cost, cheaper just to not do it. But also, by the time we'd gotten that far into the Capitol's construction, the other domed building in Denver, which was the county courthouse at the time, had a statue of Justice on top with the scales and the handle on it. And it had been struck by lightning so many times, she basically melted onto the top of the dome. She figured, why on earth are we going to spend money to do that and melt the Capitol? Who knows? That makes sense. Let's continue over to the south. Tell the sun has come out. It's been a while since I've been outside. It was cloudy when I arrived. I mentioned at the beginning of the tour that the Capitol was designed to house every office of state government. And in fact, when the building opened up in the 1890s, every single state employee worked here in the Capitol building. You had the offices of the governor, lieutenant governor, state treasurer, secretary of state, state auditor, attorney general, our legislative chambers on the 2nd floor, the state Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the superintendent of public instruction, the railroad commission, the mining commission, the land commission, the state geologist, the state engineer, the historical society, the horticultural society. Everybody was here in the Capitol. And in the late 1800s, you could do that. But as the years go by and life gets more complicated, the size of state government has grown. The Capitol now houses the offices of the governor, lieutenant governor, and state treasurer, as well as the legislature upstairs. We'll see their chambers in just a few minutes. The open doors over here lead into the governor's reception room. Anybody who has an appointment with the governor would pop in there to check in. The governor of Colorado is Jared Polis. He's a Democrat who was elected in 2018 and then re-elected in 2022. 2026, just next year, is going to be a big political year for Colorado because all 5 of our statewide elected offices are term limited. So everybody who's in those offices is looking for something new to do after 2026. But next year is going to be a big year in Colorado for another reason as well. Colorado famously, our state nickname is the Centennial State. Centennial meaning 100 years. Colorado joined the Union in 1876. 100 years after the Declaration of Independence and the United States declared itself a country. So when Colorado joined the Union, we got this nickname of the Centennial State since it was the 100th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It was a fun idea to have Colorado's statehood connected to the 100th birthday of the country, but it's been kind of a hassle ever since. Because every time Colorado has a big birthday, the United States has a bigger birthday and nobody pays attention to us. So about 3 years ago, the state legislature set up a commission planning all sorts of historic and commemorative events. There's all just scads and scads of things that we're coordinating for Colorado's sesquicentennial, our 150th anniversary as a state. I mentioned this so next year when you're watching the fireworks on TV in Washington, D.C. and the 250th anniversary of the United States, this is your excuse to have an extra piece of cake and celebrate Colorado's birthday too, because extra pastry is always important. If you'll loop around the railing here for just a second, we'll gather around in. We have 2 seemingly random holes in the first floor, one here in the south wing and one over where the tour started in the north wing. These holes were not part of the original plans for the Capitol. In fact, where we're standing when the building opened was the staircases for the building. The stairs started up on the second floor, came down to where you are on the first, from the first floor down to the basement and so on. And shortly before the building was completed, the powers that be decided that it would be a good idea to rip out everything we'd already finished and put one big fancy staircase in the middle. We'll see that in a few moments. That left these two holes in the floor, one south wing, one north wing. But the nice thing was, especially now, it let some natural light down into the basement level. So we just rounded them off with some decorative railings to help light up the basement. When you look down on the basement floor, well, it's not the most dramatic view you'll see when you're on the Capitol tour, but this view would have been very different if we were standing here in 1909, thanks to my absolute favorite Capitol employee of all time, a woman named Martha Shute. For 16 years, Martha Shute was the secretary of the State Board of Horticulture. So it's her job to encourage Coloradans to plant fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing. And to prove that we could grow anything anywhere in Colorado, in 1909, Martha Shute set 24 glass jars down there on the basement floor and put in saplings from western Colorado, pear, peach, apple, cherry, apricot, to grow a fruit crop inside the Capitol building, getting natural light from the skylight and so on. I know it happened. There's pictures of it in the newspapers from 1909. I don't know how successful it was. I can't imagine it was the greatest crop we've ever raised in Colorado. But more than anything, I desperately want to know how I get a new orchard in the basement, because that would be fantastic. We have enough dogs around the building. The dogs that love all these trees in the Capitol too. Wow, that was a new angle. I hadn't thought about that. That's perfect. I have a new chip I can add to the lobbyists. Wonderful. Any questions while we're here in the South Wing?
Yeah, these spindles, do you know if these are solid cast bronze or are they wood burred?
They're not solid, they're hollow, but they are, it's all brass, basically like a musical instrument sort of thing. So they're not solid pieces, but they are brass with a hollow sound. It hasn't happened to me in a while, thank goodness, and usually it's up on the second floor where you can see the smooth spindles. Being here as long as I have, I've had a couple of fourth graders stick their heads in between and then they can't come out. And usually we can get some soap from the bathrooms, we can do something, but a couple of times we've had to have the fire department come. By then, each of these is bolted in separately, so we've usually managed to unscrew it by then. The lesson is don't stick your heads through the banisters. I don't know if you were planning on doing that while you're here, but we'll come up with a better plan. Any other questions while we're here? Okay, let's head over into the east wing, like this way. When you visit a place like the state capitol, you think old, you think historic, and that's certainly true. But we've tried to keep up with the times as far as technology is concerned as well. And two stories connected to that. First of all, the year that construction began on the state capitol, 1886, that was the year that electricity was introduced to Denver. And so by the time we got to installing the light fixtures made here in Denver, all these brass fixtures, we designed them to be powered by two different sources of energy, by electricity and carbide gas. If you see, for example, the chandelier here in the east wing, you've got the light bulbs pointing down, and above each of the light bulbs there's this little swoop up to a point with a valve that was part of the old gas light system here in the Capitol building. We had gas lighting in the Capitol up into the 1910s. By that time we had several explosions, and yes, I know, terrifying here. Explosions in the Capitol. Gas would build up behind a pillar or in the vault in somebody's office. Several incredible injuries. How nobody was killed in any of these explosions, I don't know. But after that had happened a few times, this electricity thing didn't seem to be blowing anyone up, so shut the gas system off. Only electricity since the 1910s. The other technology story, a bit more current to our time frame. In 2012, the Colorado State Capitol became the first state house in the country to receive a LEED certification for energy use, because that was the year that we installed our geothermal system in the Capitol. There are 2 wells out in the eastern side, on the eastern grounds of the State House. We bring water naturally heated from under the surface of the earth up one of the wells, take the heat off, send the water down the other well, and then the heat cycles through the radiators, these big brass covered things throughout the Capitol. Our radiators now powered by the heat underneath the earth instead of oil or coal or anything else that we used to. I mentioned at the governor's office the idea of the centennial state and 100th anniversaries being big for the state of Colorado. It's always important to remember that centennials and big anniversaries and so on usually are times that we celebrate that are exciting, but aren't always the happiest of stories either. And that brings me to this guy, the lower of the 2 portraits here on the wall. That's Clarence Morley, who was elected governor of Colorado in 1924. He took office in 1925, 100 years ago this spring. Governor Morley is known as Colorado's Klan governor. For 2 years, the Ku Klux Klan basically dominated Colorado's state government. It ran the governor's office and one house of the legislature. There was a telephone line set up between the governor's office and the Grand Dragon's office, the head of the Klan in Colorado down in downtown Denver. And the governor would essentially receive instructions on how to carry out restrictions on people based on race, religion, immigrant status, all of that. Morley was essentially a puppet for the 2 years that he served as governor. The one thing that slowed the Klan from getting most of the stuff it wanted done in Colorado was the state Senate. There were enough members of the Senate who were either anti-Klan or just were not members of the party, members of that group, that they blocked almost everything from getting through the legislature for those 2 years. Governor Morley holds the distinction of being the only governor in Colorado's history to serve time in federal prison after he left office. Like many prominent members of the Klan in the 1920s, he had this kind of allergic reaction to the idea of paying income taxes, and then got to spend some time at Fort Leavenworth Prison for not paying his taxes. I mention this because, again, centennials, we tend to think of anniversaries as celebratory things. It's important to use them to remember the less than optimistic stories as well. I mentioned earlier that the older governor's portraits had been lost for so long, and when we found the ones that we did had been restored and so on, there was a big debate as to whether or not Morley was going to go back up on the wall. And the decision ultimately was that it said something worse if we hid his portrait in the basement and just pretended he had never been here, that he wasn't part of Colorado's story. So now I get to tell the story of Governor Morley, and as you walk by, you can extend whatever finger you would like toward him. So you're more than welcome to do that. A reminder that sometimes the warts and all stories are important, certainly important to remember as we go forward. Questions while we're here, or other comments from the elevators that like to talk? Okay, let's head over into the rotunda. Right this way. Just behind the grand staircase, if you take the elevators up 2 floors to the 3rd, you can come out and go into each gallery and just listen to the the central room of the Capitol building is called the Rotunda, 180 feet below the dome up to the top there. Here in the first floor rotunda, we have a series of murals that were installed in 1940 that tell the story of ways in which water has been used throughout Colorado's history. Colorado is what's known as a semi-arid state, which means that we're not quite a desert, but we're not far away from being a desert either. So careful management, conservation of water is essential for survival in the state of Colorado. The water mirror is a good reminder of that. Oftentimes when people come to visit Colorado, come to Denver, you look out to the mountains and you see the snow-covered peaks out there in the wintertime, and you're thinking skiing, snowboarding, all of the fun stuff. We look at that and we see water, because that's the water that's going to allow us to survive and plant crops and brush our teeth throughout the summertime. So the more snow we get in the winter, the better off the summer's going to be. The grand staircase here in the center of the rotunda was the last major addition to the inside of the Capitol, replacing the stairs that got ripped out for those oval openings. When we built the grand staircase, it really exposed the primary challenge to building the Capitol, and that was the dedication that we had to Colorado materials, trying to just use stone from Colorado. The quarries that we used for the Capitol had never been used for any project before, so they weren't developed. There weren't railroads to the sites, there weren't roads to the sites, there was no, engineering tools at those quarries to harvest the stone. The marble quarries for the floor is the best example. Those white marble quarries, stone had to be taken out in chunks, lashed to a team of horses, and dragged 40 miles through the forest to the nearest railroad. And then the trains took these meandering, circuitous journeys to Denver. It was so expensive and time-consuming to get the stone for the Capitol building that construction lasted about 3 times as long as it was supposed to and cost almost 3 times as much. As the years went by, the state government decided, this is exhausting, let's just finish the thing. So eventually they started to allow what was called foreign marble into the Capitol from places as exotic as Tennessee and Vermont, at least non-Colorado stone. The grand staircase, the best example. The white marble treads of the grand staircase are not Colorado marble. They're not Tennessee or Vermont marble either. This is what's called Carrara marble, the stone that Michelangelo was using in Italy in the Renaissance, the stone that the Roman Empire used 2,000 years ago. Up at the landing of the grand staircase, where that gentleman just turned up there, those orange-colored panels on the wall below the ring of Rose onyx on the second floor, those orange-colored panels are called Lamartine marble. It's from the French Alps and was used in places like the Palace of Versailles, the Louvre Museum in Paris. It was cheaper to get stone quarried in France and Italy, put on a boat to New York, and then a train to Denver, than it was to get stone from 100 miles up in the Colorado Rockies brought down to Denver. So the next time you hear a politician say that infrastructure is important, infrastructure is important. It's why the Capitol took 3 times as long, cost 3 times as much to complete. Questions while we're here? Alrighty, we're going to continue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
When did it build?
The construction started in 1886 and was basically finished by about 1900.
Got it.
Any other questions? All right, we're going to continue up to the second floor. If anyone would like to use the elevators, they're directly behind the grand staircase, up 1 floor to the second. For the rest of us, we'll head up the steps. We coordinate by text, so excuse me a moment. Sorry, we coordinate the tours by text, so just have to make sure everybody knows where everybody is. There are 33 stained glass windows throughout the Capitol building, although I think Emily Griffith gets the best view of everybody here. Emily Griffith was a school teacher in Denver about 100 years ago, and she established what she called an opportunity school. The idea was that instead of reading and writing and math and those school subjects, what if a person wanted to learn something to get a better job, to learn to be a plumber, a carpenter, a mechanic, something that might be able to support their family better? What we would think of as a vocational training school today. Her opportunity school opened in 1916 and is still in operation today. It's called the Emily Griffith Technical College. It's now run by Denver Public Schools, just a couple of blocks to the north of the Capitol building. We're going to loop around to the back side of Emily Griffith's stained glass window. If you guys want to go that way, we'll go this way. We'll all meet in the middle. Right. If you want to get in front of any of the windows to look into this room for just a moment. This room is the old Supreme Court. The High Court of Colorado met here in the Capitol building until 1977. We got moved out to make some more office space. This room has the largest chandelier in the Capitol, weighing 1 ton. And up there on the 3rd floor level behind the chandelier are 5 stained glass windows called Colorado Heritage windows, honoring different cultures in Colorado's history. Those were installed in 1977, the same year the Supreme Court moved out. This room has been a legislative committee room ever since, primarily. The one original oak desk is along the far back wall for our 7 state Supreme Court justices. When this room became a legislative committee room, we added the desks on the side and the desk in front for larger committee sessions. This is where the most contentious bills in the legislative session will be heard. Anything that's going to get a lot of attention, a lot of people want to listen to the debate or maybe want to testify for or against the bill, whatever. Since this is the largest committee room, this is what we'll use for those bills that are going to get a lot of attention. But it's also kind of our multi-purpose room. We'll have receptions and retirement parties in here. You can slide the chairs out of the way. We've had square dancing competitions. Anything goes on the old Supreme Court. Any questions while we're here?
When was this decommissioned as the Supreme Court?
As the Supreme Court, they moved out in the 1970s, and the way the room looks now is how the room looked when the court first moved in the 1890s. It went through a number of restorations and decorative changes over the years. In 2018, we finished a project that restored it to its original appearance. Similar projects, you'll see the results of those in the legislative chambers in a few minutes. So trying to make the building look as it did when its doors opened in the 1890s, as close as possible.
That's awesome.
Any other questions? Alrighty, the legislative chambers are here on the 2nd floor, but it's a lot easier to see them from the galleries up on the 3rd floor level. So we'll continue up one more floor and we'll see the House and Senate.
There's and then they were like, this is tunnel metal, right?
Thank you. get one of those. What did that run you? A little device.
Cost?
Your gimbal?
Yeah. Cost?
Yeah.
I
What was
don't
it
know, it's
cost?
like $150.
Not bad.
Continue right this way into the east.
Gorgeous.
All right, folks, come on in and have a seat in here. So our legislative chambers on the second and the third floor, there's gallery spaces, essentially seating for people to watch the proceedings here on the third floor. For reasons that have never made sense to me, there's some problem for the legislature when I'm up in the gallery talking about interesting things and they're talking of people's business, blah, blah, down on the floor. So since the chambers are both in session at the moment, I'm not allowed to stand in the gallery and talk, which is very rude. But just give you some overview of how the legislative process works here. At the end of the tour, you're welcome to pop into the galleries, watch the debate as long as you like. We are approaching the end for the legislative session for 2025. Colorado's legislature meets for a 120-day session every year, 120 calendar days, so that counts Saturdays and Sundays. As we get closer to the last day, every once in a while there's a Saturday session or a Sunday session. They must be feeling pretty confident because the legislature has announced they will not be meeting on Friday for Good Friday. And they usually don't take days off this close to the end unless things are moving well. The legislature starts its session about the first week of January and goes until early May. It's a 120-day session every year. We're on day 97, so 23 days left, just under 3 weeks. The last day of the session is what's known as Sine Die, which is Latin for not another day. And that is the day the legislature has to adjourn by midnight. The legislative session comes to an end even if there's work still to be done. Any bills that don't get passed before that time, better luck next session. If there's anything that the governor really thinks needs to be handled sooner than next January 2026, the governor does have the power to call a special session. 2/3 of the legislature can call themselves into session as well. We've had to do that a couple of times in the past few years, dealing with some convoluted tax rules that kind of in the middle of the year we run, oh, this is something we need to fix before, can't really wait until January to handle those. But in general, the legislative session is usually enough time. There's only one thing that the Colorado legislature has to do every year, and that's pass what's called the long bill. And I don't know why we call it the long bill, because calling it the state budget is about as fast, but that's what we call it. The long bill, because it's by far the longest bill of the session, Colorado is constitutionally required to adopt a balanced budget every year, so the state can't spend any more than it's taken in taxes. We're a little slow on the calendar this year finishing up the state budget. There have been every couple of weeks changes to the forecasting. Things are looking a little better and a little less good. So it's been kind of up in the air, but hopefully by this week the long bill should be completed. Other than that, anything that the legislature wants to do, any bills that they want to propose, any issues that a legislator feels needs to be addressed, that's essentially up to them. Usually we'll have somewhere between 700 to 800 bills introduced every session. Maybe about half of those get all the way through. We're at the point right now where if it hasn't been introduced yet, we're not going to get to it. But we're passing through what's called the third reading, the last reading of any bill in the legislature. And generally speaking, Colorado's legislature tends to operate pretty smoothly. The Democratic Party is the majority party in both chambers. It's gone back and forth over the past decade or two. But all things considered, Colorado's legislature tends to operate pretty smoothly. We'll usually have unanimous votes in favor or in opposition to something or another. It's not common for there to be a really bitter partisan divide over many issues in the legislature. So grateful for that, to be sure. The space that we're in right now is the Senate press conference room. This is a new space. We added it about 2017, 2018 when we renovated this whole area for new Senate committee rooms, and it's kind of brightening up what had been poor architectural choices in the 1960s, let's put it that way. This space actually used to be part of the upper floor of the state library. We had a 2-floor library, second to the third, and this thing that juts out and then in the corner here, those are actually pillars that were around the hole that was open down to the lower floor of the state library. The state library left back in the 60s, and this has been committee space and office space ever since then. The committees for Colorado, anybody is welcome to come listen to the debates in committees, and you're welcome to testify. If there's a bill that is covering something that you're interested in, concerned about, essentially all you have to do is you come into the committee areas and there'll be a form on a clipboard, and you put your name down, which committee you'd like to speak at, and when they get to your name on the list, then come on up. Usually everybody has about 3 or 4 minutes depending on how many people are in line to speak on any given bill. About 5 years ago or so, there was something, I don't know if you noticed it in the newspapers, it was called the coronavirus pandemic. It got a lot of attention. And it hit right in the middle of Colorado's 2020 legislative session, which set off an unexpected constitutional problem, because according to the state constitution, when the legislature starts, the clock starts on 120 days, and there was no provision for stopping it in the middle. And so the state Supreme Court had to come in a distance masked session to grant the state legislature permission to hit the pause button, left the Capitol building for about 2 months, and then the legislature came back. It was surreal, the masks and giant plastic dividers between everybody's desks and everything. Essentially, the legislature came back long enough to finish the state budget. There were 1 or 2 other big ticket items, and then they left. But only legislators were allowed in the building for the restrictions of who could go where in the spring, in the summer of 2020. So most of the legislative work shifted online, Zoom and Teams and all that fun stuff. And one of the few benefits I think that we've been able to carry from the drama of the pandemic is that we've kept that virtual option. So if you want to testify on a bill, but you live on the other side of the state and there's been a blizzard, or you don't have the money or a car or something to come from Julesburg or Burlington or whatever into Denver, you can log on and follow the committee virtually, plug your name into the comments essentially, and then they'll call you virtually as well as in person to testify. I'm really grateful that we've kept that, because it drives home the idea of democracy, that if you can't physically get to the Capitol, but there's something going on here that's really important to you, you're still able to participate in it. I'm grateful for that. So, questions while we're here before we move on? Yes, sir.
So 120 days, calendar days in session. What are they doing after this? 245 days left in the year.
After that is what's called the interim, which is just a fancy way of saying the legislature is not fully in session, but we have committees that meet year-round. Oftentimes they're working on writing up new bills or doing research for bills to introduce in the next session. It's one of those, Colorado is officially a part-time legislature. We have members who have other jobs, teachers, doctors, lawyers, and so on. We're seeing less and less of that, though, because theoretically it's a part-time job, but you are constantly in meetings, meeting with constituents, holding events, you know, town halls and meetings with people in your district. So it's part-time in theory, and it is definitely part-time in pay. Our legislature earns about $40,000 for each year during the session, and after the session, basically it's on your own dime. So if you need to come to committee meetings in Denver, whatever that is, that's out of your own pocket. It's made it difficult for some people to run for political office because, you know, how many of us can take 4 months out of our lives to work? If you're a teacher, for example, you'd basically not be teaching for the spring semester. There are not a lot of teachers who have the ability to do that. So it's certainly something we're trying to figure out how to make sure that service in the legislature is something open to any Coloradan as it should be, and that you can still, you know, survive. And it's definitely a topic of conversation, trying to figure out how to strike that balance. Other questions? All righty, well, let's head back out into the rotunda.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Amina? I thought I saw you wandering around there. Have a good time? They have the audacity to ask questions. I don't know. I mean, heavens. Luckily for you, the boring, slow part of the tour is over, and the cardiovascular exercise part of the tour begins. My friend Amina is going to take you up to the museum at the attic level, and then on up to the observation deck in the dome to see what looks like hopefully a better view now that the sun's starting to break out. So, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a terrific time with Amina on the way up. And again, wander around, pop into the galleries and the legislative chambers afterwards, listen as long as you like, take all the pictures you like. Thanks so much for joining me today, folks.
Yeah,
Take care.
I appreciate your
So much.
professionalism.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What's your name?
I'm Derek.
Derek? Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Have a good day. All right, see you. Thank you.
Can everyone please call?
There's the Senate Gallery. We got the House Gallery right there.
Okay. All right, you guys. So we're gonna go up to the dome now. There's about 99 steps in total, so it is a lot of walking. The staircase we're going up now is fine, but we're gonna go through a door, which is gonna take us up a very narrow staircase. So is everyone okay with all the walking and stair climbing? Yeah. If you're not, so if you go out here past the presidential rotunda, there's like a video with a bench, and that kind of goes over what's up in the dome if you're not comfortable going up the steps. Okay. All right, follow me.
99 steps, guys. Capitol's only 5 feet shorter than the National. Yep. All kinds of history lying around here. Wow, look at that photo.
So the portion you guys are in now is called Mr. Brown's Attic. Basically just a little mini museum. There are some interactive portions over there. Just goes over the development of the Capitol, what it took, who was involved. This is not part of the tour, just for time purposes. But after we go up there, you guys are welcome to come back down at any point and explore this area or any other area of the Capitol, okay? So we'll be up there about 15 minutes. And like I said, you guys don't have to stay for the full 15 minutes. This is the end of the tour, so you can come back down at any time and explore any other part of the Capitol, okay? All right.
Appreciate you. "99 steps, guys." Yeah. This hole in the wall. It's gorgeous.
It's a shadow down.
Here you guys go.
Sorry.
Yeah, President. That view. Let's take a walk around here. We'll go outside afterwards. It's gorgeous up here. Wow, guys, look at this. Enjoy these breathtaking views of downtown Denver. Beautiful architecture everywhere. Just put a wet floor sign up here. Right there, actually, that's a perfect photo. Showing you which way the peaks are. Pardon me. The Mount Evans. Straight that way. Yeah. Red Rocks is that way. Pardon me. Big Felt Mountain. Devil's Head. And Pikes Peak. A lovely view. Excuse me. Let's see, there's more stained glass. I'm gonna get these signs and I should be done. Miss, what was your name?
Amina?
Thank you for your professionalism.
Of course, thank
I
you.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
You ready? You ready? You get one more nice shot up here.
What's nice about the 360, it captures everything real quick.
Yeah, I need to get my hands on one of those. 99 steps back down, guys. Wow. I've never really liked these staircases.
99 problems, but these steps ain't one.
Yeah. I just never really feel secure on something like this.
As a climber,
It's the steep stairs.
It takes great restraint for me not to climb down the middle as a climber. I want to so bad. Is that stuff?
Yeah, and stuff. Make sure the door is locked. Not staff, but we'll do that. Let me take a look at some of this.
Whatever you want while we're here. That's cool, you filmed a tour. It's a good tour.
Yes, it was. Very good tour. Very professional staff, too. Look at this.
The 1890 flag. 30 star.
Yep. We can come to this portion anytime, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Just no further drink. Hello. How you doing today?
I'm good.
I'm all right. Thank you for keeping our public buildings clean.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Staff is so professional here.
Everything goes out here.
Tight and educated here. Such a lovely fucking,
Amazing, guys.
it's a lovely staircase. This is only the second floor too. 99 steps started at the third, right? We already went way past 99 steps.
Is this like day?
Huh?
Is this like day?
Feels like it. First floor. You guys go. It's our wonderful building of the state capitol in Colorado. And some history. That being said, let's bounce out of here. Absolutely. Thank you guys. You as well. This drops us off. Oh, there's a step there.
Back to the streets.
West
Beast mode.
Colfax.
Colfax, right.
That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's not my usual content, but please give me a like, subscribe, and share. This is still dealing with our public officials in a way. Hope you guys enjoyed the tour. That being said, I'm gonna hop off of here.